Welcome to CCI Drive Time, the podcast for vended laundry distributors. I'm Steve with CCI, using your drive time to cover laundromat trends, payment systems, and practical topics you can use in the field. Today, I sat down with Brian Wallace. He is the president and CEO of CLA, the Laundry Association. And I wanted to give Brian an opportunity to talk to me about how CLA works in tandem with distribution. There are so much content is produced by CLA, good content to help new investors and existing store owners learn more about the industry and how to better improve their business. But I've known Brian for a long time, and I know that CLA does more than that. They do work across other parts of the industry, and distribution is obviously my focus. And Brian did a great job of kind of talking about his perspective on distribution, how they can participate better within CLA's sphere of influence, and just a great conversation. So here we go with Brian Wallace. Mr. Wallace.
Steve.
Thank you for joining me. Yeah, this is great. Moments ago before I hit the go button here, we were just chatting about this. We've had these conversations for years, and just finally had the thought that maybe we should record and share it. And I've also shared that I like to, so far in this very early stages of this podcast, is to talk to the people that I like and that I feel comfortable with to get me up to speed. So thank you for indulging me in this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it. And you said we've probably had 20 or 25 years of rehearsals going up till now. So if we can't talk shop at this point, God help us.
Yeah, exactly. And let's talk about some of that history too. I think, I know I've heard this story before, and I've heard you speak so many times, and I'll just start at the beginning. Is that actually you're probably the best speaker? No, you are. There's no question, the best speaker in our industry for sure. Not just from a content perspective, but your delivery, your engagement, and I certainly emulate you whenever I can, because I think it's something you've been very, very good at, and I like what you're doing. But I want to take a step back into asking you some questions here about kind of how did you get into this? I mean, I know how I got into this. My family, I maybe had less choices than you did about the industry that I was going to be selected to be in. But you probably had more selections, and your days with the CLA go back over 30 years now.
Yeah, 34 years ago, which is probably around the time I met Dion. And speaking of family history, look, I just, like a lot of people you talk to that are laundromat owners, they kind of say, well, I just kind of fell into it. I had a piece of property, or a friend brought this opportunity to me, or, so for me, it was honestly, I was just looking for a job out of college. I had a organizational corporate communications degree, which, what do you do with that? So you have to do a lot of door knocking, and luckily I found Coin Laundry Association that was looking for a sort of an entry-level communications specialist, and I had a great mentor, a couple of great mentors, many great mentors at the time, but specifically here at CLA, the communications director at the time, a guy named Dick Torp, was a old school, like with the press hat and the little thing, and he had a Northwestern University degree in journalism, which is still kind of the gold standard. And so I was able to jump in here and start writing and working on our publication, working on press releases. So it was really kind of a ground floor opportunity, and gave me my first chance to really work with entrepreneurs that are laundromat owners and distributors and manufacturers. And I was pretty much hooked early on, and luckily had an opportunity to run for the executive director position just a few years into my tenure here. Was lucky enough to land that, but all of a sudden that's been 25 plus years. It's been a great experience, and I tell people it may seem from the outside as sort of one job or one position, but as you well know from being on our board and just knowing each other so long, we've certainly are in the nonprofit business, we're in the foundation business, we've been in the publication business, the trade show business, the insurance business, the list goes on and on. So it's really been a great opportunity to get involved in a lot of different things. But the sort of the touchstone for me is just really enjoy working with entrepreneurs and doing what we can to help them get to where they're going.
Yeah, you answered probably where my follow-up question was going to be is like what's kept you interested here, and I think I too like to be involved in more than one thing at a time, and so the fact that CLA has gotten themselves involved in so many layers of the industry, it probably helps keep you engaged. But at the end of the day, watching entrepreneurs find some success is that's a lot of fun, actually, to kind of see people evolve. And you've been in this long enough to probably see people start with one and maybe many locations towards over the years, and there's got to be some sense of accomplishment or pride that you had some say in some involvement in that, and at least you got to watch the journey.
It's been very rewarding, and I've said many times. My MBA has really come from working with so many incredible board members over the years. A couple hundred probably. My involvement with we didn't talk about the Clean Show or the government affairs work that we do. So it's really been an opportunity to be a sponge. And I always make this distinction, Steve, that I'm not an operator. I've never been an operator. I'm an academic, if you will. I've studied the industry and try to listen and synthesize and try to communicate that back as best I can. But I've just got the utmost respect for people like yourself that have built a business. And if we can, as an organization, play a supporting role in that, it feels really good.
Yeah, that's very perfectly said. And I think, even though you don't have any, firsthand store ownership, experience, I don't think that necessarily that is needed in every layer of getting advice, because there's also something that I always get from you when I hear you speak or when I've had my conversations with you is your ability to look past our industry into other maybe kind of similar industries, and maybe be able to kind of pull some ideas in that sometimes as a business owner you get so tunnel visioned into the operational side of thing that you kind of forget to look outside of that. And I've always thought that you've done a good job of trying to look at the parallelism, the parallel industries and kind of how they've been able to overcome maybe some similar challenges, and great job with that.
Well, thank you. You always run the risk of it being sort of an insular thing, and you only talk to the people that you talk to. And I'll give a shout out to an association executive mastermind group that I'm part of and have been for many years, that includes my counterpart at the Car Wash Association, includes my counterpart in the building contract services. So very close parallels, and really through the Clean Show, we've built in some cases, again, 20 or 30-year relationships with the Dry Cleaning Association, with the TRSA on the textile rental side. So I think it helps all of us if we can be keeping an eye on what's happening around us and see if there's some lessons we can pull from that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So, as you're aware, I created this podcast to really target distributors, and I know that there's a lot of content nowadays, and certainly you were the original content creator, I think, in this industry, just from a live perspective now. And now we're finding all these new avenues to share that content out there. But most of the stuff that I see, and I'm sure you guys spend you've really stepped up the game in your content creation, is for store owners. It's for as it should be. That's the first. If we don't have good store ownership, we don't have an industry, right? So we have to focus on that. But coming from distribution, you mentioned my dad, Dion, and I've always been fond of the distribution layer of this industry, and CLA. does stuff does some things that are similar to what a distributor should be doing. And I'm going to, say
Yeah.
should very, very carefully there. And so, I thought that we would take some time here, and as part of this is not over focus on what store owners are doing per se, because you've done a great job kind of sharing the stories there, but you've also worked with pretty much every distributor that's in this industry, and there's things that work, there's things that don't. You have a view of observations there that I thought we could dive into a little bit, but where I wanted to kind of start was is to kind of you define where you see CLA and distribution doing the same things, and where you think distribution needs to step forward and CLA needs to step back, and maybe in the other direction too. Like, where is CLA better off when it comes to providing this consultative layer of helping store owners get going or adding or whatever?
No, I appreciate that, and I told you when we saw each other recently that I love that you've taken the content right to the distributor with this, with this series, because I do think it runs the risk of getting overlooked at times. And when it comes to CLA, I think part of our secret sauce is that we are a vertical association. You look at a lot of these other industries. The operators have their own group, and the wholesale distribution has their own association, and the manufacturers or allied trades have their own thing, where people long before me decided it was a good idea to try to do this working together in this vertical. And occasionally there are rubs and scrapes and differences of opinion, but for the most part we found that we can really get a lot more done working together. So I looked before we started, we've got 105 distributor members of CLA, so that's no small chunk of folks, and that certainly that reflects some of the consolidation that's gone on as well. But no, I certainly consider distributors to be a very integral part of all this, and key to success. Certainly learned a lot from distributors over time. We've had distributors serve on our board, and with a few exceptions, I would hazard a guess that maybe I've been to more distributor shows than any human being alive, and that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mostly good. So you're right. We can provide a lot of guidance, really at the top level, directionally. Certainly try to bring people's base of knowledge up. We can, like I said earlier, sort of share some of the synthesized, best advice that can come through. But there's really no substitute for that local distributor with boots on the ground, with that local experience. And so I don't see a lot of conflict. I really see it as a complementary roles that we play. And you can imagine we make, we're brand agnostic and certainly distributor agnostic, but we do make a lot of these referrals and connections and introductions, particularly for our new members. And I've come to learn that they really see that as a valuable part of what we do. One thing that I've shared far and wide is that when a new investor or store owner joins CLA, one of the first things they get is a link to my personal calendar to book some time. I want to get on a first name basis. I want to get that immediate contact so we can figure out the best way to help those folks. And those are incredibly insightful conversations. I say it's like a daily focus group as to what's happening out there, and there's just a lot of very positives. But if and I have been asked, well, what's the number one complaint that you get over the course of all these calls, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls? Honestly, the number one complaint that I've gotten, and it's certainly not every call, but the most frequent is I can't get a distributor to call me back.
Wow.
That's
amazing.
And I've certainly shared that. And when someone's a member, I said, I guarantee someone's going to call you back because I know so-and-so. And I'll make sure that you get connected. But, to kind of this general theme of what's happening in distribution right now is that it's awfully busy. You have a family distributorship. The inquiries are coming fast and furious. In this age now of social media content and the TikTok, we know we get hundreds of inquiries a month here from people that may or may not be really qualified financially to get into it. And I can certainly empathize with distributors that are being inundated with. I saw on TikTok, I've got $10,000, I can do a laundromat. So. So I think that when we kind of look at these evolving roles and what distributors need to do, and I think a lot of them are really sort of adapting to, how do you take these, just this high volume of inquiries and suss through, who are the folks that are really ready to do business, and how can we both support them and get people to where they're going. So it's certainly been a more challenging role. I said this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I've always said I think the distributors have the toughest job in this industry. You may or may not agree because you've got experience in store ownership, manufacturing, and distribution, but no one has it easy, but the distributors certainly have a tough job out there.
Yeah, no, I actually won't disagree. Having all three of the categories, manufacturing, distribution, and store ownership, I would say the distribution is absolutely the toughest part of that. It's I may have heard you say that before, that one of the biggest challenges is getting somebody to call back, and that's something that infuriates me as much as it is maybe eye-opening at the same. But it infuriates me because. I don't know if you've heard this term sometimes in sales. It's like half the battle is just showing up, and to me, picking up the phone is showing up. And there's just a ton of stories that I've witnessed firsthand and have been involved in, where showing up just has an incredible payoff, for everybody involved in that. And so, this. I spend a lot of time talking about just even basic sales 101 things, not because we've never heard these things before, but obviously we need to be reminded of them occasionally. And so it's good hearing from you about that. And if nothing else, there are a lot of people out there that are getting some, I'm going to say bad advice, but it's a troubling advice about what it really takes to get in this industry. And the last thing a distributor who's already very busy needs to do is explain to 20 people a month that you don't have enough money to do this, and I don't know how else to say that to you nicely.
Yeah, no, I get it. Because again, we get the inquiries too, and one of the strategies, or maybe just a tactic that I've shared with some of these distributor salespeople who are just inundated, is that this sounds a little self-serving, but have them sign up for our monthly webinar at CLA. We do a how to start a laundromat. We just did one on Tuesday. 140 something people registered. We get hundreds of people a month, and it's a way to sort of pre-qualify because we're going to give them the scoop on the business. It is brand agnostic, and most importantly, perhaps we tell them what the resources are that you really need, as well as what the day-to-day looks like. So. If people are struggling with the volume of inquiries, let us help in that we can try to provide that education in a clear, hopefully a clear and concise way. So when they do approach a vendor, it's certainly better if they've got a little bit of a foundation beneath them and have a better understanding of whether or not they're really ready to go for it. I saw you at an event in Detroit a few weeks ago, a woman who joined. We had our new member call just a few days ago, and she really said it was a very helpful opportunity to meet up because she had a better understanding of what she really needed financially. You remember this meeting, this 300,000 coming up, and she said, "Oh my goodness," But we talked through what that really meant, how the financing works. And she said, you know what, now I've got a game plan. I know what I'm going to need to do. I'm not going to get there this year, but maybe in a year or 2 or 3, I'll be ready to get moving. So I think all of this really comes in this consultative sale. Like, how do we really make sure that we're giving the people the information that they need?
Yeah, no, that's great. And those are some of the stories that I've heard about. You don't want to not help everybody to some level, because there are those opportunities where, like, well, I don't have that now, but I'm going to work for this now. That game plan is really important, and we've been involved in that here in Laundry Concepts in the Chicago market, where we've seen that happen, and they'd be very successful. But it took a couple years for them to find their way there. I'd be curious, when you have all these consults with new investors and people interested in the business, where, what is the big, is it the money, but what is the knowledge gap that you think exists from what people are learning now that we all need to somewhat be kind of aligned with, whether it's CLA and distribution that's talking to investors, where is the gap? What is the knowledge gap? Is it the funds needed to get into it, or is there other things?
No, really awesome question. I think about this a lot because obviously we're all trying to fill those gaps as best we can. So, yeah, I think if I was thinking about the knowledge gaps with the newbies, I would say certainly better understanding of the finances, not just how much I need, but then how does the financing work in what I would call our sort of captive financing ecosystem in the industry, where we've created this these financing opportunities internally. I would say that there's also a knowledge gap in terms of sort of process or sequence. All right, well, if I find a location, then like what happens next? Like, do I have to get pre-qualified? Is this where I talk to the distributor? Do I have to sign a deal? And then same thing on acquisition, Steve. I get that question a lot about sequence. Well, I see this store. Do I start with the LOI, or is that too soon? Or then the NDA is before that? And so, some of the better content I've seen here recently are attempts to try to help that first timer kind of understand process or sequence, and where do these other industry resources kind of play into it. My distributor, my broker, my association, my finance person, my insurance. Yeah. How many times have we gotten to closing and, oh my gosh, no one got the insurance? So helping people better understand that sequence, I think, is part of the knowledge gap. And we all need to do our level best to try to help people better understand it. And sometimes it's not linear, right? Yeah. It's not step A, B, and C. Sometimes you have to zig and zag a bit to get there.
That's actually really, really good advice, I think, if we want to take it a step further from a distributor's perspective, because we do have a lot of consolidation, and I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit, but we're also seeing a lot of new faces being hired by these consolidated, because people are leaving, there's some of them are retiring, and then they've got to backfill the army, the boots on the ground army for these distributors. And so not all of them are they know how to open up the laundry. They've been trained on what the equipment can do, how the equipment works for them. That's their first priority, is to make sure they understand the products that they're selling. But I think maybe you'll agree with me that some of the most successful distributors out there are the ones that really understand all the layers of what it takes to be in there and be advisory of that. And what I'm hearing, one, is that CLA can be really a leaned on partner in that regards to help that, but not just to get the customer up to speed, but I think a few distributor salespeople could probably learn a little bit from those, a fly on the wall conversations, if they've never helped somebody start a business before, and there's maybe somewhat of an expectation that just because you're a laundry equipment distributor, that somehow how to start a new business, forget that it's a laundromat. And so, there are a lot of effort, I think, should be made, advice to new people. Hopefully this is a resource for them. They say is learn what it takes to open a business, not just to sell them the laundry equipment. You got to be part of the whole equation. It may be hard to justify their ROI of time that goes into that, but really our ROI is when we move the machines. But if you have no mechanism to move the machines, then what's the point? So that's really good advice. And I think it's something that I think people maybe don't realize that CLA can be a part of. And so, kudos to you.
Well, no, it's our job, it's our role to try to help facilitate people doing business and do it in a successful way. And you talked about other sort of affiliated industries or similar industries. I mean, a lot of them have gone through this, sort of this brain drain, this wave of retirements, people aging out, and one of the things that's been really beneficial on this wave of more information through social, through influencers, and through CLA, and really manufacturers like yourselves putting content out there, is what had long been a sort of a tribal knowledge, literally kind of passed down oral tradition of sitting around for a cup of coffee or a cold beer and sharing all these insights, to how do we open that up and make that more accessible, not just to the operators, but to this new generation of distributor salespeople that have entered the business. Now they're bringing other strengths, right? They're bringing maybe in my opinion, maybe a little stronger knowledge of kind of the nuts and bolts of sales. Certainly a better facility with technology, but learning those inside baseball insights about the industry is something that we need to be able to push through. And I know that it's a point of emphasis for a lot of the manufacturers and certainly some of the larger distribution groups now. Like, how do we get our new men and women coached up and make sure that they're ready to help our customers?
Yeah, that's great. Now, hopefully there's even an opportunity maybe for CLA to be guiding, to providing best practices as it relates to that, because you're hearing the stories already that they're going to hear when they get involved with these customers. There should be some alignment there. So a lot of this information gets disseminated at distributor events. We talked about all the years you've been to more distributor events than probably anybody in this business. And so I'd love to pick your brain a little bit about kind of what makes a great distributor event. And I've told this, this story before, which is that, my dad, he's been in the business for a long time. He'll talk about doing events in the 80s where they would just sell so much equipment. That was when you just sold millions of dollars of equipment at these events. And ever since, and I've been in the industry 27 years now, and there are very few shows that I've been to where there's been, millions of dollars of equipment probably moving at those events. Now, he clarifies, which is a really key point, is that in the 80s, discounting of laundry equipment was maybe not as prolific unless you went to the event. There was a real reason to go to this event because that was the best time to get a good price. It's a real incentive. And, as there's been more competition, there's more manufacturers, there's a lot of things that just the discounting and so forth, you get a good deal kind of almost every day of the week if you know how to negotiate correctly. And so the incentive to attend a distributor event is different now. It's not the same thing. Certainly there's opportunities to save some money at an event, but I'd be curious, as you observe the best events, maybe you've also been to the ones where maybe you're the only one there.
Or you and I were the only ones.
You and I are the only ones there eating the provided lunch.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you have kind of categorized what makes a great distributor event, because we should all be paying attention to that from our observations.
Yeah, no, it's a great question and something I've thought a lot about and lived it, right? Day to day. I think that the events, in my opinion, again, I'm not going to argue with Dion. You can't argue with success, and it was a different era, right? In terms of how, and even access to information was so much different. Yet you had to do it face to face. But I think in recent years, the events that have really stood out to me are the ones that have been less focused on sales, frankly, and more focused on education and building relationships. And sure, I think that if you educate people, help people get connected, I think the sales are soon to follow, right? Because yes, there are price shoppers, but increasingly, I think people are looking for a source of education and relationships and connections. And I think if you can create events and opportunities that are focused on that, the sales will naturally follow. So, and I also think, honestly, that you and I can both walk into an event somewhere and we know instantly whether the distributor's heart was in it, whether they really invested in the marketing, whether they really went out and pounded the pavement, or did they take a build it and they will come approach. And the latter doesn't work, the former does work, and you know it within minutes of showing up at an event. And I always assume that the new investor or the existing store owner walks into that room and they can make that same assessment on their own.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I think I also, the events, and interestingly enough, even though it seems like there was this kind of a period where I felt like distributor shows were just not being well attended, and because with CCI we attend a lot of these events, that's why we get to see you throughout the year. Right. Is trying to we want to help the distributor be successful, because we all don't want to go out there and stand and I'd love to talk to you, but we can do that here. We live not far from each other. We don't have to go to
Yeah.
to the odds of the country to the to have these conversations.
Hmm.
And so, I think putting together best practices for people to have these events, because I think you're right. They may not be necessarily sales events, and we should stop thinking about them as sales events in the same way. Certainly, if someone wants to buy something, we're not going to turn their business away, but focus more on what they're going to get out of that event.
Right.
And part of that is, I think, which I think CLA has also done a really good job with, unrelated to that, is the networking between the operators in a given market. And I would say that some of the best events that I've been to, and you've been to the same ones, you see the exact same people at them every year that they host them, because they look forward to the opportunity, I think, to collaborate with each other, to discuss their pain points, their successes, see what's going on. Even socially, they want to catch up.
Sure.
But that's
Hmm.
all then associated with the distributor that brought them all together. And your
Yeah.
own events are great examples of all of that, the CLA hosted events.
Well, look, I mean, again, it's all about value, right? And what is the value proposition for an existing operator to show up at an event? Like Dion said back in the day, it was like, well, that was how you got your 20 off on the deal, and you had to show up to get it. And again, there's still rebate programs and other incentives that are out there, but I just think that the value proposition today is strongest when you're in a position as a distributor, as a host, to provide education on what's going on in the industry, marketing. The talks that I've seen you and your team give at these events are great. And it's not about your bells and whistles. Typically, you're focused on, well, how do you leverage, in this case, a professional payment system to help you do more business, or to make your life easier managing a store. And so I think if we can focus on education, and if we can backfill that with lots of opportunities to network with their peers, that's how you're going to have new people coming every year, and having those return customers come to the event. And I got to imagine when it comes time to make a purchase, and if I've been to this event every year and I've gotten to know the team, and I know the person at the front desk, and I know my salesperson, I know the service guy, I think that's naturally where I'm going to look first when it comes time to make a purchase.
Yeah, well said. And I will grant it, as though the pricing was certainly an advantage back in the day, because there was maybe a little less of the discounting outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the availability of information nowadays, since you can kind of get it, whether good or bad or indifferent, you needed to go to those events to get information. It was difficult. So good. Let's push forward a little bit here and talk more about, we mentioned a little bit about distributor consolidation has been something that has been very, I mean, again, in the years that we've been doing this, it was in the past 5 or 6 years, this has been pretty incredible, to kind of see the level of consolidation that's gone on. And I'm curious, I think we all know, if you don't know, that I think most of that reasoning is that there's a lack of succession in a lot of these. These have been historically been a lot of family-owned businesses. We're fortunate here in Chicago that my brother and I were interested in in kind of continuing something that my father started, and I'm fortunate enough I have a son that's joined, and he seems to be equally interested in kind of being involved. But that's not true everywhere else. I had Carl Hendricks on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he tried to get his kids to do it, and they just said, "Dad, you just work too hard. I don't want to do that." I guess truth is painful, but it's also good to hear. I'm curious, are there other factors that you think are coming in outside of just the succession that's driving all of this consolidation?
Yeah, but I think that again, it's nothing special about the laundry business.
Yeah.
You look at wholesale distribution or other types of small businesses, the lack of succession planning or exit strategy is definitely a big challenge. And I'm sure that the manufacturers saw that as well as we did. I remember, I won't name names, but I remember being at a distributor, maybe it was a cocktail party with the host manufacturer, and kind of looked around the room. He said, "Man, there's just a lot of gray hair here. What comes next? Not just for that family business, but then you can see it from the manufacturing standpoint. Is like, boy, my distribution network is is aging out and needs some help. So I definitely think that was a big factor. I just think that there's also, the industry's been terribly successful. And I think that just draws interest from outside resources that, whether it be private equity or folks that have experience in wholesale distribution, and saying, well, here's another channel that maybe we haven't explored yet, and maybe there's an opportunity there. So yeah, I think some of the manufacturers were motivated to try to sort of secure or solidify or sort of reinforce their distribution network, and in some cases they saw the path from making acquisitions in order to do that. And I think outside groups that have seen success in wholesale distribution said, well, here's an industry that really was flying under the radar. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to jump in and make an impact.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think, I'm curious too. Would you think that maybe you can share this whether you're comfortable or not too, but as you talk to the investors that are maybe leveraging your services, and you're getting to the point where they need to really get engaged with the distributor, and maybe they've visited a few, I think any good consumer should interview who they're going to kind of partner with in this very big adventure. Are you noticing any trends between this consolidation of working with a consolidated distributor versus a more independent one? Are there things to learn? Because I'm thinking about it. We're still a family-owned distributor. We're not owned by anybody. We're all bootstrapped and kind of always run that way. But we compete against the consolidated ones, and we like to tout what we think is good about that. But I'm curious if from your observations, are you noticing anything about how investors are in getting engaged with these two different types of distribution, if any?
Yeah, and I would say that whether it's an independent distributor or a consolidated distributor, I think the fundamentals haven't changed a whole lot. I think from the store owner perspective, whether it be an existing operator or a first timer, you're looking for clear, concise information. You're looking for responsiveness. You're looking for coaching, and you're looking for follow through, right? And so I've seen plenty of instances where independent distributors have executed on that, and lots of examples where they haven't. And I've certainly seen examples where a consolidated distributor delivers on those things, and plenty of examples where they haven't. So I think that gets to your point about shopping and reaching out and networking and trying to build your sort of your laundry network as an operator or potential operator. Is I think at the end of the day, the reliability, the responsiveness, the authenticity, the follow through, those are the things that are going to win the deal. Whether you're part of a 30 distribution group or what we've seen too, Steve, right, is a lot of new distributors, new independent distributors that have jumped into the fold. So I think you got to do that job. And one of the notes I made coming into this conversation was this is an observation I shared had a chance to address a distribution group several years ago, and I kind of walked the group through this notion of is the sales experience commensurate with the size of investment that you're asking for? And I kind of talked about, well, has anyone bought a luxury vehicle recently? Well, maybe you spent $80,000 or $100,000 on the vehicle. Oh, what was that sales experience like? Oh man, the folks were put together, the nice showroom. And then I gave the example: has anyone put a couple $100,000 or $500,000 with a stockbroker and a financial advisor, and what was that sales experience like? Oh my gosh, the place was beautiful and very professional salespeople. And I said, well, if someone's going to put in a $2 million laundromat, what does that sales experience look like? And I think some people had, had a little bit of, self-reflection to do. And again, I wasn't trying to put anybody on the spot, but just really think about, if we're asking new investors, let alone existing operator, to spend the better part of $1 million, just to pick a round number, to buy equipment, that sales experience, whether it's the physical experience, the showroom, but really the quality of engagement with everybody on the team and the follow through ought to reflect a situation where you're asking someone to spend $1 million. And if there's a gap there, particularly I think the new investors that are tending to come to it with more business experience, or certainly from a corporate background, I think the expectations have rightfully come up. And I think the real challenge for that distributor is, how do I make sure that I'm delivering at that level to win the deal?
Yeah, that's a great observation and great advice. I mean, and what I get out of that more than anything else is that for those who are, maybe thinking about being in distribution, you've got service techs out there, you've got salespeople out there that are maybe wanting to do something more, no different than an entrepreneurial laundry owner wanting to open a store. There are people out there that want maybe not own a store, but they want to get involved in equipment sales, or in that layer of it is that there's nothing you said there meant that being part of a consolidated group was exclusive to being part of an consolidated. You can be very successful by treating, like in all businesses, treating the customer the right way and following through, and sales 101 and everything else that we've already talked about. So that's excellent. I'm glad that you were very that you shared that with you. I want to now move into a little bit, because you started talking about not only is a consolidation happening on the distribution side itself, but we have all this kind of private equity. We have a multi-store ownership. It feels like there's more multi-store owners than we've ever had. And we have this new form of financial backing that's coming into this with the PE firms. And I'm curious, you've probably talked to all of them, they probably find you at some point.
Sure.
Is there a different level of expectation that a group that is looking to one thing makes it complicated. Sometimes they're not even buying in one territory. They're maybe buying across multiple territories, multiple states. All this stuff what kind of expectations do you think they have, if any, differently from a distributor versus the mom and pop, small town, one store, get started? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, my answer is pretty similar to the prior one, which is, again, they're going to have an expectation, probably even more so. Maybe they're looking to spend $5 million with you, or $10 million. So, and again, I'm kind of using the aesthetics as kind of an example of like, what's the environment look like. I'm not saying, that belies, some of the other key factors, but, looking for that professionalism, looking for that high level of responsiveness and feedback. And I think, and you may have seen this, where I think that it also requires even more sort of integration or partnership with the manufacturer, where you gave the example of being in multiple markets. Well, boy, that regional salesperson at the manufacturer, washer manufacturer, better be engaged in this process too, right? And they better be in a position to help, engage in different markets, with their distribution partners. And again, I think that has been a leg up. I've seen several scenarios where the ability for the manufacturers, regional sales reps or national sales reps, to be able to help integrate in multiple markets, I think is becoming more important than ever. But, I think, again, it's no different in a lot of ways from that, that well-resourced individual investor that wants to do their first store, as well as whether it's a PE-backed or multi-market scenario. I still think that they're looking for those same basic things, information, concise, follow-up, clear path, clear next steps. And I think that's what's going to continue to win the deal.
Yeah. Again, I'll piggyback on my other statement in some regards that, any distributor can deliver on that. Any person can deliver on the things that are important, because that doesn't change just because you have $5 million to invest instead of $600,000. And keeping the sale experience commensurate with the investment is something we should all think about. When we're courting with investors and making sure we're doing the right things when we're working with them on that store. I want to talk a little bit about some of the other things that CLA does, and particularly if there are things that maybe distributors can help with, is some of the advocacy and legislative issues that you guys don't get enough credit for. I think I'm starting, and I'm proud of you, starting to talk a little more about it openly. Like, you might as well just share with the world with the things that you do. So, maybe take just a moment or two to talk about maybe some of the topics that are maybe hot right now, and if there's anything that distributors can get involved in, because we need a healthy industry. Not just selling equipment, but if again we got it, it's all layers of this have to kind of work together for us all to be successful.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you. And certainly our advocacy, legislative and regulatory, is a big part of what we do. And yes, we're trying to do a better job of talking about it. We just recently published an advocacy impact report that could be downloaded over at laundryassociation.org. And as we did our homework and started looking back at the last 25 years, we came up with a pretty conservative estimate of about $7.4 billion saved on behalf of the industry. And so that's
Wow.
an aggregation of all the sales tax efforts on a state-by-state basis. It certainly had a lot to do, that number, with our ability to get our industry classified as essential during the pandemic and the fact we were able to stay open those couple of months, which was billions of dollars in itself. And even the more recent efforts, which have been related to the mandates being proposed for microfiber filtration on a per washer basis. So these are all things that would impact everyone through the food chain. And again, another reason that we ought to be a vertical association. And I think the ways that distributors can help is obviously, number one, be a member, get connected on that basis. But I think the distributors have a unique reach to the local operators when it comes to simply sharing the information, right?
Yeah.
If you can help amplify, hey guys, this is an issue that we're dealing with, here's the information. And Steve, one of the things that goes a long way is the grassroots. And so if we need to be all reaching out to Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so, the distributor is in a great position to reach out to their client base and say, hey, let's knock on these doors, let's make these calls, let's send these emails. And one of the things I've learned in 30 plus years of doing the lobbying is that it makes a big difference. It really makes a big difference. What are 5 phone calls going to mean, or 10 phone calls going to mean? It means a lot. It shows up with the staff on behalf of these legislators. And when it comes to the membership piece, both as distributors being members and store owners being members, you can imagine that one of the very first questions I get, usually from a staffer, is how many members do you have in my district? How many laundromats are in Senator so-and-so's district? It sounds very transactional and very crass and very, but believe me, I get those questions. And the more I can say, well, here's a few great operators that are in your district. I love to introduce you to them. In fact, let's go down and pay a visit together. That was one of the key factors on the microfiber issue in California, was being able to get Assemblymember McKinner down to Jerry's store in Hawthorne, California. That made a world of difference. Something that sounded kind of academic, or what does this legislation really mean, to going to the laundromat, lifting up the bulkhead, seeing how these things drain. And so distributors, I think, can keep themselves apprised of the issues and share with their customers.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's good. And I think it's not a difficult thing. You just we all have to be aware that these issues are not just store owner issues.
Mm-hmm.
If the store owners can't do business the way they should be able to, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt everybody. So excellent,
Mm-hmm.
excellent. You also are. You play a big role in some getting the community, giving back. Laundry cares is something that I know you're passionate about, and you've been instrumental in making it what it is today. I'd love for you to share a little bit about how can distributors be involved in that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit more. Take an opportunity to say how distributors can be involved in that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And you've been involved as well. I mean, the Laundry Cares Foundation is really our idea. Like, how do we give back to the communities that have supported our business? When I think back on 34 years or multi-generations, I've always felt that our livelihoods starts with that mom dropping a quarter or swiping a card at the laundromat. And these are often under-resourced neighborhoods, and I feel like we have a unique opportunity, if not an obligation, to try to give back to those communities. And by the way, it's good for business, right? When you do events, when you engage, it's a competitive advantage. And so I think the way I've seen distributors engage is showing up as volunteers at events. And one of the biggest takeaways I've heard from some of the distributors is, number one, they get addicted to a free laundry and literacy day event because you're there's energy, you're helping the community, you're giving back. But what they often tell me is, you know what, I got to meet a couple of my competitors here today. Joe or Sam or Sally, and it just changes the perspective, right? We're not fighting the death over a deal. We're trying to help a lady out to a car with her laundry or giving a book to a kid. So I would highly recommend that the distributors listening find a way to get engaged and maybe just start by volunteering. And again, invite some of your store owners to come out and volunteer. And I think it'll really change their perspective on what laundromats can really do in the community.
Yeah, no, it's great. I have been involved in a handful of events. I certainly should be involved in more, but I've had employees actually participate and really, because everybody has different passions, you know what I mean? And some of my employees, I had no idea that there was something they found passion in very quickly, and it actually gave them a different level of respect for the industry that they worked in, and even maybe a little bit, I'll piggyback on it for us for helping them get involved in that. And so,
Sure.
By all means, you talk about being good for business. That can take many different forms beyond just the fact that, there may be a sale somewhere down the road or better business for that store owner, but it can have all kinds of impacts beyond that. So yeah, that's great. You guys are doing a great job there. As we get close to the end here, I would love to have you, as I ask everybody, to pull out your crystal ball a little bit and give me a sense of. I'm going to ask a few questions here, but one is what's the future for CLA? What do you see changing? What do you think we're going to see? What changes, if any, or what do you see the CLA evolving in here for the next few years? Obviously, the industry is evolving. What does that mean for CLA?
Yeah, well, I said earlier about how distribution companies need to evolve and change to meet the changing demands of their clients. Well, we're trying to appeal to those same folks to become part of the organization. So, we've been in a sort of a perpetual state of change here the last few years, everything from rebranding to just relaunching our magazine to creating the CLA Spotlight channel for content. And so what we're trying to do is, it's a race for relevance, right? For really any organization in the industry. How do you stay relevant? How do you stay valuable? And we're continuing to look at ways to how do we make the membership more valuable, not just to manufacturers and service providers, but distributors and ultimately to the owner operators. And so we've leaned into education, we've leaned into networking and events, we've leaned into social media, we've leaned into better and different ways to deliver that information. Our women's laundry network has been just an incredible cohort of women working together in the industry. So I think really the future for us is continuing to evolve with the needs of the industry. And when it comes to things like government affairs, frankly, try to do a better job of communicating that and shining a light on the work that we're doing on behalf of the industry.
Awesome. And then, what are you optimistic about in the industry as a whole? I mean, what is, I'm going to be in this for a while longer. I have a feeling you're going to be around for a while. What makes you have optimism about this industry moving forward?
Yeah, my first thought is to kind of go back to the beginning conversation is just having a lot of faith in entrepreneurialism and what that motor, that drive that the entrepreneurs have that we all work with. That gives me just an enormous amount of optimism for the future. Are the challenges changing? Yes. Is it more difficult? Is it more expensive? All those things are true. But going back to the early days of this industry when CLA was first formed in 1960, you go back and look at some of that material. What are they talking about? Boy, this is some bad legislation we got to put an end to. We need to have more conferences. We need to get more people together. So when I look back at minutes from 1961, it really is focused on some of the things we've been talking about, here this morning. So I'm very optimistic, and I know that spirit of the entrepreneur is going to carry us a long way into the future.
Yeah, I agree. Brian, this has been terrific. You're exactly what I was hoping was going to come out of this conversation. Again, we get to have these chats, and I'm grateful that you were able to make some time to have it and share it with everyone that's interested, because I think there's a lot to be learned here. But thank you very much. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I know I'm going to see you on the road again here soon.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the invitation, and appreciate your longtime support through membership, through board service, and you all have really been an emblem of what we need from all of our industry partners. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the road for a cold beverage sometime real soon.
Appreciate you. Cheers.